Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into something we've all been through, but we rarely actually stop to deconstruct it. We're looking at a word that just carries an incredible amount of weight in our lives: failure. We usually treat it as a definitive end, right? Like a final verdict. But today we're going to create a quieter, more reflective space to gently reevaluate our deeply held definitions of what it actually means when things simply do not work out. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the central question we're exploring today. When a plan falls through, when a relationship ends, or say a business doesn't make it, our absolute first reflex is to look back and say, well, that was the wrong choice. We completely fuse the outcome with the initial decision. But are they really the exact same thing? We're going to gently pry open this closed assumption about our past setbacks.
All right, let's start with section 1. What do we call failure?
Think about just how heavy and final the word failure really feels. When a habit doesn't stick or a plan falls apart, the progression in our minds is incredibly fast. We try something, it doesn't become established, and literally immediately we stamp it with the word failed. What starts as a simple observable event, just something not taking hold in reality, quickly morphs into this permanent label. And that label has a really unique power because it immediately begins to close off future paths. And this is where the structural trap really takes hold. Just look at this chain reaction. From failed, we internalize the whole outcome. We jump straight to, my judgment was completely wrong, which then leads to, I am inherently not suited for this, and finally, I should just never try this again. You see how a single unestablished outcome gets internalized as a permanent character flaw or total lack of ability? It's intense. Let's powerfully contrast these two phrases, because the difference seems tiny, but it actually changes everything about how we handle time. Could not do it simply describes an event under very particular, localized conditions in the past. But can't not do it, that is a generalized evaluation of your entire future. By swapping these two, we let one failed attempt act as a spokesperson for every future condition, even though the future hasn't even happened yet, and conditions are absolutely going to change. Moving on to section 2, the architecture of establishment. Let's try shifting our perspective entirely for a moment. Instead of obsessing over why things fail, let's examine what it actually takes for something to work out. For any project or idea to take root, it requires an incredible convergence of conditions. We're talking ability, time, resources, the surrounding environment, human relationships, institutional support, timing, and expectations. When we visualize it all laid out like this, we start to see just how rare and fragile the alignment of all these multiple variables actually is. It's like a giant puzzle. So what is establishment really? It is merely the temporary alignment of multiple conditions. And because establishment is temporary and conditional, it logically means that non-establishment, what we typically just call failure, often simply means that some required conditions just weren't aligned at that specific time. It's an observation of conditions. It's not necessarily a total invalidation of your choice. That brings us to section 3, outcome versus decision quality. Now, to be absolutely clear here, we are not trying to glorify failure or spin it into some purely positive motivational message. No way. The reality of unsuccessful outcomes absolutely must remain visible. Failing hurts. There is real loss, real pain, lost time, impact on others, and real responsibility. If there was a genuine mistake or poor planning, accountability remains. Looking through a structural lens does not erase responsibility, for sure. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it decompresses that heavy, loaded word, failure, into a complex formula. An outcome isn't just your decision. It is your decision, multiplied by the environment, multiplied by other people, chance, and time. Because of all those intersecting variables, the outcome alone does not perfectly reveal the quality of the original decision. A brilliant, well-reasoned decision can encounter terrible timing and, well, fail. Conversely, a rushed, poor decision can occasionally get lucky and succeed. Outcomes absolutely matter, but they are an incomplete mirror of our judgment. Let's move in to section 4, re-observation and re-establishment. How do we actually look back at things that didn't work out? Well, the standard reflex is compression. Something fails, we frantically point to cause A, and we lock in a conclusion. But re-observation, that's a quieter process. It means acknowledging the non-establishment and then actually reopening the conditions to observe the differences. We step back and ask, okay, what specific conditions were missing or mismatched here? It's not about defending the past, it's just about untangling it. And that brings us to reestablishment. Reestablishment is creating a form that can become established under current conditions. But I want to be very, very clear about this. This does not mean stubbornly repeating the exact same attempt over and over until it magically succeeds.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. Restoration is trying to return to the exact previous state, forcing things to be exactly as they were. Reestablishment, on the other hand, acknowledges that time has passed and conditions have changed. It is the creation of a fundamentally different structure. Something that collapsed previously doesn't have to return in the exact same shape. It might establish itself in an entirely new way.
Let's look at Section 5, Work, AI, and Systems. Think about how this applies to your own daily life. If a relationship ends, that non-establishment doesn't mean the entire connection was meaningless, right? In your career, if a certain approach didn't work in one specific corporate environment, it doesn't mean you lack ability entirely. The environment simply didn't align. And in organizations, a project's failure rarely means the individual in charge was the sole problem. There are usually massive structural conditions at play. Though, again, we always preserve absolute accountability for preventable negligence.
We also have to be really careful with how we use technology to make sense of our setbacks. There's a modern trap here with artificial intelligence. When something fails, AI can instantly generate market analyses, psychological factors, and extremely fast, plausible explanations. The risk is that this sheer speed turns genuine uncertainty into a fixed causal story. It gives us a false sense of understanding when, in reality, some conditions are simply unobservable.
So instead of using AI as some sort of oracle that determines the definitive true cause of a failure, we should use it as what the source texts call an interference surface. We can use it to carefully separate out what is actually confirmed, what is merely inferred, what is changeable, and crucially, what remains forever unknown. And if we zoom out even further, we see this isn't just about individuals. Entire civilizations operate as multi-layered systems of establishment, unmaintained institutions, withdrawn infrastructure, brilliant technologies that were just never adopted, or collapsed communities. These are all forms of systemic non-establishment. Physically, a technology might work perfectly, but socially, the meaning hasn't caught up. The layers simply didn't align. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, the meaning of lost paths. So the crucial point is this fundamental perspective shift. An unestablished outcome is simply a difference in conditions. It is not a permanent identity. It is not a court ruling on your worth or your past. It's simply data, a difference returned to you through direct contact with reality. We're going to leave you with this final thought. When something doesn't work out, does it truly justify closing every future path connected to it? Or, if the conditions change, could a previously unestablished path find a way to become established, perhaps in an entirely different form? Take some time to observe your own lost paths, not as permanent failures, but simply as conditions waiting for a different alignment. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.